Good evening, everybody. Let's try to get this channel back to where it should be. And this video that I made spur of the moment a few days ago because it was on my mind, but of course sound didn't record, so now I have to try to recreate it the best I can in a different state of mind. But regardless, my fight continues on many fronts as always, and everything's always harder than it needs to be. I was explaining to somebody, for some reason, tasks that are simple for most, there's like roadblocks in my way that I must overcome. It's like Homer Simpson trying to build his barbecue, Why must life be so hard? And it's almost funny, except for when it gets overwhelming, because the harder I fight, the higher the roadblocks get for some reason. It's almost as if I must accept at some point that, I can't battle my demons and overcome everything I need to overcome quickly by myself, which not something a lone wolf really wants to hear, especially when that lone wolf is currently in an area where there's no one I really trust. Not that there isn't a few people I really trust, it's just they're not local. So, but regardless, which leads me astray, but I'm getting to my point, the ghosts of narcissistic abuse. And what do I mean by the ghosts of narcissistic abuse? Well, I mean the ghost of all the abuse that you've suffered. The thing, the memories, the feelings, the triggers, everything that stays with you even after you're out of the abusive situation, you're out of the abusive environment, the abuser, you are no contact. The feelings that linger and haunt you and haunt your future, no matter what you do, because it's these patterns of behavior that you notice, you can't unnotice now, and you're always, looking over your shoulder. You're always wondering who's up to something, who's out to get you, who's using you, who's exploiting you, because that behavior, those patterns of behavior were done to you usually for a significant period of time, but also normalized in most cases. Those of us that have been through narcissistic abuse, abuse by borderlines, any cluster Bs, or just abuse and exploitation in general that wasn't an isolated event, that behavior by the abuser and their enablers becomes normalized. You're told that it's not such a big deal. How many of you have heard, well, was it really that bad? Yeah, I heard that. I heard that from let's be tactful here, a professional employed by my former government employer who, tried to make light of behaviors done to other people, including myself and others that had a job where you ride a big red truck a lot of the time, all to protect the name of a supposedly progressive area. And in doing so, they'd rather sweep the abuse of multiple people under the rug to protect the name of other people who committed these acts of their own free will because they are the good old boys. I think you all know what I mean there. So, but stuff like that. How it's normalized, how it's told, how you're told, those of us that have suffered the abuse, that it's not such a big deal. And to just get over it and move on. But you can't, because it's a ghost. And the funny thing about a ghost is the ghost has no physical form. And if somebody physically is trying to abuse you in some way, depending on who you are and your size and your abilities, you can physically take that person on. You can resist. How well that'll go, depends situationally. But a memory, a ghost, how do you fight a ghost? How do you fight a reaction that your body gets when you're exposed to certain behaviors or certain things trigger certain memories and takes your mind back to that time, back to that place? Whether you want to be there or not, you can't escape it. And perhaps you have gotten away. So now you're away. You're out of that environment. Those people are gone. But things are going to remind you of it. Those ghosts follow you. So now you're away from it, but certain behaviors mirror certain behaviors that you underwent. People are doing things perhaps benignly or actually in an act of kindness, but it's something your abuser did, so it triggers that mindset. Now you're back in that traumatic state, and in some cases it's worse, because though you're removed from that situation, you're in a new place. The people around you probably don't know what you've been through. they don't know why you're acting the way you're acting. And let's be honest, those of us that are on this channel, we understand, well, different types of abuse. We understand abuse as a whole. A lot of us have been through different types. But broadly speaking, as abuse victims, we understand other abuse victims when we see these reactions or similar reactions. A lot of people don't. Think of the people who were, quote, normal, had, the Leave It to Beaver upbringing, who never had, an abuser who has a cluster B personality disorder. This won't make any, if you try to explain it to them, it won't make any sense to them. It's foreign to them. They don't understand how it works, how the narcissist gets in your mind and normalizes their behavior, blames it on you, scapegoats you, and uses enablers to prop themselves up and are able, at least for a time, to wear a mask to where the community as a whole sees them as the saint that they so want to be seen as. So it's very hard to explain. I mean, even as recently as 10 years ago, narcissistic abuse wasn't really understood, and it was very hard to explain. As I said it before, and YouTubers, that have been doing this longer than I have, far longer, like Ollie Matthews said, growing up with it, in his case the 80s, in my case the 90s, you think that, it's something you can't explain. We're talking about narcissistic parents here, that, your parents are these masterminds, and they know how to manipulate things better than anybody else, and manipulate truth, and something's wrong, but you don't have a clue as a kid how to explain it. And obviously, in my childhood in the 90s, there was no YouTube back then, because the creator of it, Chad Hurley, was still in high school. He was talking about it. I had to sit through those assemblies, because he's from here, and his mom was my second grade teacher. So the idea of YouTube was known to me at the time. I didn't think he'd ever get it off the ground, but now that he has, and he's wildly successful, hey Chad, can I have some money? But seriously, dude. Alright, so, a little humor. Come on, I need to invest in some more crypto. My money's tied up in the estate and all the bills I had to pay for my mom's final expenses. Oh, but it's your mother. Yeah, but I also had to cover my brother's half too, which I shouldn't have had to do, but I did, because he's a man-child. Sorry, little trigger there. So when you're dealing with the ghosts of abuse, it can even be harder to explain. Now, why do I say that? Because a lot of people, when you see abuse and it's not happening to them, they won't do anything in the moment. Later they'll be like, oh, it's horrible what you went through. It's horrible. It's like, you saw that go down and you did nothing. My favorite example of this is the ultimate coward. And that is Mike McQueary, the former Penn State assistant coach, who watched Jerry Sandusky, sexually assaulting a 10-year-old boy. Jerry Sandusky was a overweight, rather feeble 60-ish-year-old man, and Mike McQueary was in his prime, in his mid-20s, fit, former college athlete. So Mike McQueary could have easily overpowered Jerry Sandusky and stopped that from happening, But no, he worried about his career because, Sandusky, the good old boy, right? It takes someone with true courage, like a 19-year-old model, to jump a prominent photographer who sexually assaults a female model and says he has every right to do so because of who he is, and it's a perk of the job. But the 19-year-old male model didn't care, and connections and all that doesn't stop someone attacking you. So yeah, that's the difference there. And I bring that up because a lot of people won't do anything in the moment, but they'll talk about it afterwards, and they'll talk about how wrong it is and you got to get away from it. But when you're dealing with the ghosts of narcissistic abuse, you don't even have that. You don't even have those people that are like, oh yeah, I noticed what was going on, it just didn't seem right, but I didn't know if it was my place to say anything. In other words, you're a coward. But no, you don't have that. So people, if you're dealing with the ghosts and you're away from the abusive situation, people, for the most part, aren't even going to understand what you're trying to tell them because they can't see it. And again, if they're from a normal background, they won't understand it either. So you're stuck with these ghosts, and it can screw up moving on with people you actually want to be around because, those of us that have been abused, trust doesn't come easy to us. And if you're me, you're an INFJ too, and trust doesn't come easy to you naturally. But, not to sound all Freudian, but I couldn't trust my own mother. So growing up with that, what do you think that did for my trust issues? Yeah, my borderline mom stabbed me in the back more times than I can count. And I'm an INFJ on top of it, so trust is really, really, really hard for me. But I do manage to trust a few people. But, of course, in the beginning, I'm like, why? Why do you want to help me? Why? Why? Oh, especially growing up in this area. It's like, I want to help you. Why? Everybody else, not only, everybody else around me, it's like they don't want to help me. They want to, anything that I want, they want to take it away from me. I don't expect their help. I expect, leave me alone. Be like, yeah, you go do what you want. And I may think you're crazy, but I'm not going to get in your way either. It's like, that would have been awesome. But no, you will fall in line. We are Borg, essentially. So that can be difficult. You meet the right people. They're genuinely trying to help you, but you're afraid because your response is, if somebody is asking you to open up, if somebody wants this information, they're going to use it as ammo. That's what the narcissist does. Every bit of information they learn about you in any regard will be twisted and used against you to control you, because remember, above all else, to the narcissist, whether the narcissist is your parent, your significant other, your friend, you are their property. In their eyes, they truly believe it. I've heard narcissists, and especially borderline, say it so many times over the years, like, that person, like, they speak in the possessive, that person's mine, and especially if you get to, like, more prominent industries. It's been a while, but I remember a few conversations, knowing what I know now in the modeling industry, where particularly older men who discovered younger female models were like, I discovered you, I own you, and yeah. And they feel, the narcissist, the borderline, that they have the right to do that. To them, you are their property. And remember, regardless of your gender identity or your sexual preference, if you are in any type of romantic relationship with a narcissist or a borderline or a cluster B, they are not your significant others. They are your master. You exist only to please them, and they feel they have the right to do whatever they want to you at any given time. And you should be so lucky to be in the presence of this, demigod, essentially. That's how they view themselves. You corner them. If you can corner them, get in their head, they'll even admit it. They'll try to justify it right after, but they slip up and say their crazy shit. I've gotten them to do it. I've gotten rather good at it over the years. I've been weaponized, but weaponized my intuition. It's quite effective. So dealing with these ghosts can be overwhelming. They're not going to go away overnight. You're constantly going to be on guard. You're not going to know who you can trust. While you're going to be free of the abuse, the triggers that bring back those memories could be all around you. And the best thing I can say is, you can't really hide from them. If there's somebody that you really want to get close to, that you can trust, you have to tell them about what you've been through and try to explain it the best you can. Fortunately, in the modern context, there's, channels that are better than mine, or even if you use mine, that can explain what this type of abuse is and how these people operate and what their motives are. Back in the day, we didn't have that. So now there's, you can go to somebody and be like, well, this is what I went through. Hey, don't take my word for it. Watch this video. This person explains it pretty well. If it's me, it's like he rambles on, but he'll eventually get to his point. So you can do things like that, but you can't keep it a secret. If there's somebody you truly want to understand what you've been through, you got to lay it all out there. That is your only chance, because if you let it come out slowly over time, that person may be like, what's going on? And honestly, if they really care about you, they're not going to judge you for being a victim of abuse. Never forget, if you were abused, it is not your fault. You need to get out of that environment and live the life that you should have been living. And I'm going to tell you, as someone who's been exposing abusers and as the little Lethan witch, that you should, and I encourage you to expose that person for who they really are, because that'll make it harder for them to hurt somebody else, and they should be seen and judged for the actions that they have taken and have their mask ripped off and perhaps face divine justice through the goddess, depending on their actions. Believe me, she'll do it. So, probably. So there's that. So dealing with the ghosts of narcissistic abuse can almost be as hard as the abuse itself. Because it makes, even though you're away from it, it makes it harder to explain. Because the people, once you get away, the people don't know the abuser. They don't know that type of abuse. They don't know the environment you escape. They don't understand why you act the way you do. And it's very hard to explain to people who don't get it. And that is why the ghosts of narcissistic abuse will continue to haunt you for a while. And it will take time. Those ghosts will never completely go away, but you can get them to a point where you're not dealing with them very often, that it would be rare occurrences where they manifest themselves, but don't expect that to happen too fast, and trust your intuition on who you can explain your abuse to and who will really understand. And if it's somebody you really like and you think they'll understand, you have to tell them the full story and give them the opportunity to try to understand and see how they'll react to it. That's basically all I got for this one.